The morning sky turned black without warning. 8,000 ships appeared above Earth like a swarm of metal locusts. They blocked the sun over every major city. People stopped in the streets. Cars crashed on highways. Children pointed at the sky while their parents stood frozen in fear. Admiral Vathax watched the blue planet from his command ship. He had conquered over 300 species in his long life. He had burned worlds and enslaved billions. Earth was supposed to be easy. His scouts had watched humans for 50 years. They saw a divided species. Nations pointing weapons at each other. Religions fighting over old books. Rich people ignoring the poor. The Valkyrie High Council had laughed when they reviewed the reports. These creatures could not even unite their own planet. They would fall within days. The broadcast began at exactly noon. Every screen on Earth showed the same image. A tall gray alien with 4 eyes and skin like cracked stone spoke in every human language at once. The translation was perfect. The message was simple. People of Earth, we are the Valkyrie Dominion. We have ruled this galaxy for 100,000 years. Your planet now belongs to us. You will surrender all weapons. You will present your leaders for processing. You will serve the Dominion for the rest of your existence. Resistance means death. You have 6 hours to comply. The transmission ended. Silence fell across the world. Then something unexpected happened. In Moscow, a young missile operator named Alexei Petrov looked at his commanding officer. The officer was pale and shaking. He had no orders. The government was silent. Petrov thought about his daughter. She was 3 years old. She liked to chase pigeons in the park. He thought about her growing up as a slave to monsters from the stars. He launched his missiles without orders. In Beijing, submarine captain Liu Wei made the same choice. In Washington, in London, in Delhi and Cairo and Tokyo, soldiers and civilians alike made decisions that would change history. A teenage girl in Texas hacked into a defense satellite and turned its weapons toward the nearest alien ship. A retired general in France drove a truck full of explosives into a landing zone. The Valkyrie had expected fear. They had expected surrender. They had never expected 6 billion people to choose death over slavery. Within 6 hours, 19 Valkyrie cruisers had fallen from the sky. They crashed into oceans and mountains and cities, killing thousands of humans in their death throes. But they were dead. The mighty Dominion had lost ships to primitives who still fought with nuclear weapons and chemical rockets. Admiral Verthax stood on his command bridge and felt something he had not felt in 300 years. Confusion. His officers looked at him with wide eyes. This was not supposed to happen. Conquered species begged for mercy. They did not attack. He made his decision quickly. If these humans wanted death, he would give them death. The bombardment began at midnight. Valkyrie ships carried weapons that could crack continents. They used them without mercy. New York vanished in a flash of white light. Shanghai became a crater. London, Mumbai, Los Angeles, Moscow, Cairo, Sao Paulo. City after city died in nuclear fire that fell from the sky like rain. 2 billion people died in the first week. The survivors ran. They fled to mountains and forests and deserts. They hid in caves and tunnels and abandoned mines. They watched their world burn and they screamed and they cried and they held their children close. But they did not surrender. Something strange happened in those dark days. Something the Valkyrie could not understand. Old enemies stopped fighting each other. A Chinese soldier shared his last food with a Japanese refugee. An Israeli doctor saved the life of a Palestinian child. American and Russian soldiers fought side by side against alien ground troops. The divisions that had defined humanity for thousands of years melted away like snow in summer. There was no more east or west, no more rich or poor, There was only Earth and the monsters who had come to take it. Dr. Elena Vasquez was a physicist from Argentina. She had spent her life studying theoretical physics in a quiet university. When the invasion came, she lost her husband and 2 sons in the bombardment of Buenos Aires. She walked for 3 weeks through burning forests until she found a resistance camp in the Andes Mountains. The camp commander was a man named James Okonkwo. He'd been a special forces soldier in Nigeria. He had seen war before, but nothing like this. He looked at the broken woman who stumbled into his camp and saw something in her eyes. Not defeat, something else, something dangerous. "I know how their shields work," Elena said. Her voice was flat and cold. "I watched them kill my family. I studied the energy patterns. I can break them." James handed her a notebook and a pencil. "Then break them." Across the world, similar scenes played out. Scientists who had competed for grants now shared every secret freely. Engineers who had built cars now built weapons. Teachers who had taught children now taught soldiers how to kill. Every human being became a weapon in the war for survival. The Valkyrie sent ground troops to finish the job. They expected to hunt scattered survivors. They found something else entirely. They found traps and ambushes in humans who fought with a ferocity that shocked even veteran warriors. They found people who smiled as they died, as long as they took an alien with them. Commander Verthax received reports that made no sense. His soldiers were dying at impossible rates. Humans were capturing weapons and learning to use them within hours. They were adapting faster than any species he had ever seen. 3 months after the invasion, a Valkyrie patrol found a message carved into the glass of what had once been the Sahara Desert. The bombardment had melted the sand into a flat mirror that stretched for miles. Someone had written words in that glass. The letters were 50 meters tall. They were written in the Valkyrie language. The message was simple. It was surrounded by the bodies of 10,000 dead alien soldiers. "We remember. We are coming." Admiral Varthax read the report in his command room. He looked at the images of the message. He looked at the bodies of his soldiers arranged in neat rows by human hands. He thought about the 300 species he had conquered. None of them had ever done anything like this. For the first time in his long life, he wondered if he had made a terrible mistake. On Earth, in 1,000 hidden camps, humans prepared for the long war ahead. They had lost their cities. They had lost billions of their people. They had lost almost everything. But they had found something too. They had found each other. And they had found a purpose that burned brighter than any star. The Valkyrie had come to break Earth. They did not understand what they had awakened. They did not know that humanity had spent its entire existence fighting itself, growing stronger with each war, learning from each defeat. They had picked a fight with the wrong planet. 10 years had passed since the sky burned. The Valkyrie claimed victory. They told the galaxy that Earth was a pacified territory. They built bases on every continent. They planted their flags in the ashes of human cities. They sent reports to the High Council saying the resistance was crushed. They were lying to themselves. Humanity had gone underground. Not as a figure of speech, but literally. Beneath the mountains of every continent, humans had built cities. They dug with their hands at first, then with machines they stole from their conquerors. They carved homes out of solid rock. They built factories in caverns that had never seen light. The largest underground city was beneath the Andes Mountains. They called it New Hope. 50,000 people lived there in the darkness, working every day to build weapons and plan revenge. Dr. Elena Vasquez led the science division. Her hair had turned white in the years since the invasion, but her eyes still held that cold fire that James Okonkwo had seen on the day they met. James was now Commander Okonkwo. He led the United Terran Resistance, a force of 40 million soldiers spread across the planet. They lived in the shadows. They struck at night. They killed Valkyrie patrols and vanished before dawn. Every dead alien was a small victory. Every captured weapon was a gift from the enemy. The Valkyrie could not understand what was happening. They had conquered hundreds of species. All of them had accepted their fate within months. The strongest had resisted for a year or two before breaking. But these humans kept fighting. 10 years later, they were still fighting. They were getting better at it. Admiral Vertex had been replaced after the embarrassment of the early losses. The new commander was General Kriegstahl, a warrior who had crushed 12 rebellions. She studied the humans carefully. She increased patrols. She burned forests where resistance fighters might hide. She offered rewards for information about rebel locations. Nothing worked. The humans had learned to trust no one but each other. They had built a network of spies that reached into every Valkyrie base. They knew enemy plans sometimes before the enemy officers did. Elena spent her nights studying captured alien technology. The Valkyrie shields had seemed like magic at first. Now she understood them completely. She had built human versions that were actually better. The alien weapons used energy crystals that grew only on Valkyrie worlds. Elena found a way to make them from common Earth materials. But her greatest project was still incomplete. The thing that would change everything. The Valkyrie ruled the galaxy because they could travel faster than light. Their ships could cross from star to star in days. Humanity was trapped on Earth, fighting a defensive war they could never truly win. To strike back, they needed to reach the stars. Elena had captured a damaged Valkyrie scout ship 3 years ago. She had spent every moment since then studying its faster-than-light drive. The technology was incredibly complex. It bent the fabric of space itself. Most of her team said it was impossible to copy. Elena did not believe in impossible. Lieutenant Yuki Tanaka was 26 years old. She had been 16 when the invasion came. She had watched her parents die in the bombardment of Tokyo. She had walked across the sea, floor in a stolen diving suit to reach the resistance in China. She had killed her first Valkyrie soldier at 17. By 26, she had killed over 300. Commander Okonkwo called her to a meeting in the deepest chamber of New Hope. Elena was there, along with 11 other soldiers. They were the best fighters in the resistance. They all knew this meeting meant a suicide mission. "We need a working FTL drive," Okonkwo said. His voice was calm. "Dr. Vasquez can build one, but she needs to see a complete, undamaged unit. There is a Valkyrie space station in orbit that handles all FTL travel in this sector. It has what we need." Yuki looked at the holographic image of the station. It was huge. It held 2,000 Valkyrie soldiers. The defenses were designed to stop entire fleets. "How do we get in?" she asked. Okonkwo smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "We have a friend." The friend was a Valkyrie soldier named Dex. He had been captured 2 years ago. Instead of torturing him, the humans had talked to him. They had shown him kindness. They had asked about his family, his dreams, his fears. At first, Dex had been confused. Conquered species did not show kindness. Then he had been suspicious. Then, slowly, he had begun to listen. The humans told Dex about Earth before the invasion. They showed him pictures of children playing in parks. They played him music that made him feel emotions his species had forgotten long ago. They told him about love and hope and freedom. Dex had never questioned the Dominion before. His people had ruled for 100,000 years. It was simply the way things were. But talking to these humans, he began to wonder if the way things were was not the way things should be. He agreed to help. Dex smuggled the team onto a supply shuttle. Yuki and her 11 soldiers hid inside cargo containers meant for the station. They had weapons, explosives, and a device Elena had built to copy the FTL drive's design. The mission went wrong almost immediately. A guard decided to inspect the cargo. Yuki killed him quietly, but his body was found an hour later. Alarms screamed through the station. 2,000 Velkari soldiers began hunting 12 humans. The battle lasted 9 hours. Yuki's team fought through corridors filled with enemies. They used every trick they had learned in 10 years of war. They set traps. They created diversions. They sacrificed themselves one by one to buy time for the others. Yuki reached the FTL drive chamber with only 2 teammates still alive. Both were badly wounded. She connected Elena's device to the drive and began the copying process. It would take 15 minutes. Velkari soldiers were cutting through the door. Yuki's 2 remaining teammates took positions on either side. They would hold as long as they could. The door fell. Energy blasts filled the room. 1 teammate died instantly. The other killed 5 aliens before falling. Yuki stood alone, firing with both hands, counting the seconds. The device beeped. Transfer complete. Yuki pressed the button on her chest. The explosives she carried were enough to destroy the entire station. In her final moment, she smiled. She thought about her parents. She hoped they would be proud. The station became a ball of fire that could be seen from Earth. 6 months later, humanity launched its first faster-than-light ship. They built it in a cavern beneath the Rocky Mountains. They made its hull from the melted remains of monuments that had survived the bombardment. Metal from the Eiffel Tower, steel from the Statue of Liberty, stone from the Great Wall. They called it the Remembrance. Commander Okonkwo stood on the bridge as the engines came to life. Elena was beside him. They had both grown old in this war. They had both lost everyone they loved. But in this moment, they felt young again. "Where do we go first?" Elena asked. Okonkwo looked at the stars on the view screen. Stars that had seemed impossibly far for all of human history. Stars that were now within reach. "Everywhere," he said. "We go everywhere. And we show the galaxy what humanity can do." The remembrance vanished in a flash of light. The war had entered a new phase. Earth was no longer a prison. It was a starting line. The Velkari High Council gathered in their ancient chamber on Velkari Prime. The room was older than human civilization. Statues of legendary conquerors lined the walls. For 100,000 years, this council had ruled the galaxy without challenge. Today, they were afraid. 12 systems, said Councillor Vexnar. His voice shook with anger and disbelief. The humans have attacked 12 systems in a single day. How is this possible? They had 1 ship 6 months ago. The answer was simple, though the Velkari refused to believe it. Humanity had not just built 1 ship. They had built 300. Hidden factories on Earth and the Moon had worked day and night. Every human who could hold a tool had helped. They had launched their fleet in secret, hiding behind the dark side of Mars until the moment was right. Supreme Commander Amara Stone led the Terran Liberation Fleet. She was 50 years old. Her left arm was mechanical, a replacement for the one she had lost fighting Velkari soldiers in the tunnels beneath Chicago. She had short gray hair and eyes that had seen too much death to ever be soft again. Her war council had debated their first target for weeks. Many wanted to strike Velkari Prime directly. Kill the head and the body would die. It was the obvious choice. Stone chose differently. The Dominion rules through fear, she told her admirals. They have crushed 300 species. Those species hate them. They dream of freedom, but believe it is impossible. We are going to show them it is not. The Terran fleet did not attack Velkari worlds. They attacked slave colonies. The Rithani were an insect-like species. They had 6 legs, compound eyes, and shells that changed color with their emotions. They had served the Dominion for 6,000 years. Generations had been born and died in chains. They had forgotten what freedom felt like. Commander Okonkwo led the ground assault on Rithani Prime. His soldiers breached the walls of the largest slave camp at dawn. The Velkari guards fought hard, but were outnumbered. Within 3 hours, the camp was free. Okonkwo walked through crowds of Rithani who stared at him with eyes that held no hope. They had seen conquerors before. They expected new masters, new chains. He found the eldest Rithani in the camp. She was ancient. Her shell faded to a dull gray. She had lived through 3 failed rebellions. She had watched her children and grandchildren die in Velkari mines. Okonkwo knelt before her. He held out a rifle. It was a human weapon, modified to fit Rithani hands. "We did not come to conquer," he said. "We came to ask for your help. Will you fight beside us?" The old Rithani stared at the weapon. Her shell flickered through colors that Okonkwo did not understand. Then she reached out with a trembling limb and took the rifle. "My people have dreamed of this day for 6,000 years, she said. "Show us how to use these weapons. We will fight until every Velkari is dead or gone." The same scene repeated across the galaxy. The crystalline beings of Axis 7 had been slaves for 2,000 years. Their bodies were harvested for the rare minerals they produced. When human ships appeared in their sky, they thought it was simply a new harvester come to take them. Instead, humans landed and offered alliance. They brought medicine for the sick. They brought engineers to fix the broken machines that kept the crystal people alive. They asked for nothing in return except friendship. The aquatic Morians had lived in underwater prisons for 8 centuries. The Velkari had drained their oceans and forced them into small tanks like fish in bowls. Human soldiers came with equipment to build new seas. They spent 6 months creating homes for the Morians before asking them to join the war. The architects were perhaps the strangest ally. They were ancient beings who lived in the Void Nebula, creatures of energy and thought who had existed before the Velkari rose to power. The Dominion had trapped them in special prisons that fed on their life force. They had been dying slowly for 10,000 years. Elena Vasquez led the team that freed them. By now, she was famous across the Resistance. The woman who had cracked Velkari technology. The mother of human starships. She studied the architect prisons for 3 weeks before finding a way to break them. The freed architects were weak, but grateful beyond words. They shared knowledge with Elena that pushed human science forward by centuries. They taught her secrets of energy and matter that the Velkari had never discovered. One by one, the enslaved species joined the coalition. 50 species in the first year, 100 in the second. By the 5th year of the liberation, 300 species flew under the banner of the United Galactic Alliance. The Velkari High Council watched their empire crumble with growing terror. Slave colonies that had been quiet for millennia suddenly erupted in rebellion. Species that had served without complaint now fought with the ferocity of the damned. And always, at the front of every battle, were the humans. General Crickstal was sent to stop them. She gathered the largest fleet in Dominion history. 10,000 warships. 2 million soldiers. Enough firepower to burn 100 worlds. She met the human fleet at the Battle of the Crimson Nebula. Stone commanded the Alliance forces. Her fleet was smaller, only 6,000 ships. But those ships carried crews from dozens of species, each fighting for their own freedom. They had everything to lose and nothing to fear. The battle lasted 3 days. It was the largest space engagement in galactic history. Ships died by the hundreds. The nebula turned red with the light of burning vessels. In the end, Crickstal retreated. She had lost half her fleet. The Alliance had lost a third, but the Valkyrie could not replace their losses. The Alliance could. Every victory brought new species to their cause. Every freed world produced new soldiers. Stone stood on the bridge of her flagship, Earth's Fury, and looked at the field of debris. So many dead. So much sacrifice. But they had won. Send a message to every world in Valkyrie space, she told her communications officer. Tell them the Alliance is coming. Tell them freedom is coming. And tell the Dominion this. She paused, thinking of the billions of humans who had died. Thinking of the years of darkness underground. Thinking of every species that had suffered under Valkyrie rule. Tell them we remember every world they burned. Every species they enslaved. Every child they killed. Tell them there is nowhere in this galaxy they can hide. We are coming for them. And we will not stop until every chain is broken. The message spread across 1,000 worlds. In slave camps and prisons, beings of every shape and size heard the words of the human commander. They heard the promise of freedom, and they began to hope. 30 years of war had changed everything. The galaxy that had trembled under Valkyrie rule for 100 millennia was burning. Worlds that had never known freedom now flew Alliance flags. Systems that had been slave factories were now fortresses of resistance. And at the heart of it all were the humans, the Deathworlders, the ones who would not break. Admiral Chen Wei was born in the underground cities. His mother had been a soldier. His father had been a factory worker who made weapons until his hands bled. Chen had never seen the sun until he was 12 years old, when the resistance finally took back a small piece of the surface. He remembered standing in the light, crying without understanding why. Now he commanded the largest fleet in Alliance history. 2,000 ships crewed by 30 different species. Rathani gunners who could hit targets at impossible distances. Morian engineers who understood water and pressure in ways that made their shields nearly unbreakable. Architect navigators who could sense the fabric of space itself. And humans. Always humans. They held the fleet together. They planned the strategies. They did the impossible things that made other species stare in disbelief. The assault on the Korath shipyards was supposed to be impossible. Korath was the heart of Valkyrie military production. They built 500 warships there every year. It was protected by defense platforms, minefields, and a garrison of 50,000 soldiers. Chan attacked it anyway. His plan used tactics from 100 different species and 1,000 years of human military history. He sent Rithani soldiers through the minefields in ships so small they did not trigger the sensors. He had Morian submarines hide in the ammonia oceans of a nearby moon, then launch surprise attacks on the defense platforms. He used architect technology to appear in 3 places at once, confusing the enemy commanders. And when the defenses were broken, human Marines led the ground assault. Captain Maria Santos was first through the breach. She was 40 years old, born during the liberation of South America. Her grandmother had survived the first bombardment by hiding in a collapsed building for 3 weeks. Her father had died in the tunnels beneath the Andes. Her mother had been one of the scientists who helped Elena Vasquez build the first human shields. Maria had grown up knowing that war was not just her job. It was her birthright, her responsibility, her purpose. She fought through the shipyard corridors with a rifle in one hand and a blade in the other. When her rifle ran out of power, she picked up a Valkyrie weapon and kept firing. When that ran out, she used her blade. When the blade broke, she used her fists. The Valkyrie soldiers who faced her were veterans of 100 campaigns. They had crushed rebellions on 12 worlds. They had never seen anything like human Marines. The humans did not fight like other species. They improvised. They adapted. They used their environment in ways that seemed insane. Maria ordered her soldiers to blow holes in the station hall, using the vacuum of space as a weapon against enemies who were not prepared. She set traps that would make no sense until they were sprung. She sacrificed pawns to take queens. A Valkyrie officer later wrote about the battle in his personal journal. The document was found after the war. "They should have lost," he wrote. "We outnumbered them 3-1. We had better positions, better weapons, better training. But they kept coming. They laughed while they fought. They sang songs I did not understand. When one fell, 2 more took their place. They did not fight like soldiers. They fought like forces of nature, like storms that did not care how many ships we sent against them. The shipyards fell in 18 hours. Chan's fleet destroyed 3 years of Valkyrie ship production in a single day. The balance of power shifted forever. But the ground war was where humans truly terrified their enemies. General Thaxor was considered the finest ground commander in Valkyrie history. He had broken the rebellion on Axis 7 in 3 weeks. He had pacified the Mauryan resistance in 6 months. When the High Council sent him to hold the fortress world of Karam Prime, they expected him to stop the Alliance advance. He lasted 4 days. The humans used weapons no one had seen before, not because the weapons were advanced, but because they were insane. They dropped soldiers from orbit without ships, using nothing but personal shields and controlled falls. They tunneled under fortress walls, using machines they built from captured equipment. They pretended to retreat, then detonated bombs they had buried weeks before. Thaxor sent increasingly desperate reports to the High Council. "They do not follow rules," he wrote. "They do not respect the accepted ways of war. They will sacrifice 1,000 soldiers to kill 10 of ours if those 10 are important enough. They smile when they die. They make jokes while they bleed. I have commanded armies for 200 years. I do not understand these creatures." His final report was found in his command bunker, written as human soldiers broke through his last defenses. "I finally understand why they call them Deathworlders. Their planet tried to kill them every day of their existence. Predators, diseases, natural disasters, and each other. They evolved to survive the unsurvivable. War is not horror to them. It is simply another challenge to overcome. They do not fear death because they have always lived with it. We made a terrible mistake when we invaded their world. We thought we were awakening a primitive species. We awakened something else entirely, something that had been preparing for a fight like this since before they left their caves." Year after year, the Alliance pushed deeper into Dominion space. The Valkyrie threw everything they had at the advance. Elite soldiers, ancient weapons, desperate last stands. Nothing worked. Supreme Commander Amara Stone grew old leading the war. Her hair was white now. Her mechanical arm had been replaced twice. She walked with a limp from a wound that had nearly killed her at the Battle of the Dark Reach. But her mind was sharp as ever. Her will was unbroken. On the 40th anniversary of the invasion of Earth, the Alliance fleet arrived at Valkyrie Prime. 12,000 ships surrounded the enemy homeworld, the planet that had ruled the galaxy for 100,000 years. The source of all the suffering, the head of the snake. Stone stood on the bridge of Earth's fury and looked at the world that had killed so many of her people. Behind her stood commanders from 100 species. All of them had lost their own worlds. All of them had waited for this moment. The Valkyrie High Council sent a transmission. For the first time in their history, they requested terms. Stone answered in a voice that was broadcast across the galaxy. Every world heard her words. Every species that had suffered under Valkyrie rule listened. "You came to our world without warning. You killed 2 billion of our people and expected us to kneel. You thought our divisions made us weak. You did not understand that we were merely practicing for the real fight. She paused. The bridge was silent. Even the sounds of the ship seemed to fade. Now you will stand before the ghosts of everyone you have enslaved, every species you crushed, every world you burned, every child you killed. You will explain to them why the galaxy should let you live, and you will accept whatever judgment they decide. The transmission ended. The siege began. And on 12,000 ships, soldiers of 100 species prepared for the final battle. The war was not over yet, but everyone knew how it would end. The trial of the Valkyrie lasted 3 years. It was held on a space station built specifically for this purpose. The station orbited a dead world, a planet the Dominion had destroyed 10,000 years ago when its people refused to submit. The choice of location was deliberate. The ghosts of the murdered would witness justice at last. Representatives from 400 species sat in judgment. Each had suffered under Valkyrie rule. Each had stories of loss and pain that could fill libraries. Each had waited generations for this moment. The accused were brought before the court in chains. The entire Valkyrie High Council, the admirals and generals who had led campaigns of extermination, the officials who had run the slave camps, the scientists who had experimented on prisoners, everyone who had made the Dominion's crimes possible. Supreme Commander Amara Stone did not lead the prosecution. She refused. "I am a soldier," she told the court. "I know how to fight wars. I do not know how to run trials. This is too important to trust to anger. It must be done right." Instead, she appointed a council of legal experts from every species in the alliance. Humans were only a small part of it. This was not humanity's trial. It was the galaxy's. The testimonies were broadcast to every world. Survivors of Valkyrie atrocities spoke their truth for all to hear. A Rithani grandmother described watching her children taken to the mines, never to return. A Morian elder spoke of the day his oceans were drained, how he watched his people suffocate in the dry air. An architect shared memories that were billions of years old, memories of a peaceful galaxy before the Dominion rose. And humans testified too. Children who had grown up in underground cities, soldiers who had fought for decades, scientists who had lost everything and turned their grief into weapons. Elena Vasquez, now ancient and frail, spoke for 6 hours about the friends and family she had buried. The Valkyrie defendants listened in silence. Some showed no emotion. Some seemed confused, unable to understand why they were being judged for doing what their species had always done. A few, very few, wept. When the testimonies were complete, the court deliberated for 1 month. Then they delivered their verdict. The Valkyrie Dominion was dissolved. Their military was dismantled completely. Their weapons were destroyed. Their empire, which had stood for 100,000 years, ceased to exist. The leaders received different sentences based on their crimes. Some were executed. The galaxy watched as the beings who had caused so much suffering finally faced consequences. It was not celebration. It was closure. Others were sentenced to something humans called restorative justice. They would spend the rest of their lives helping to rebuild what they had destroyed. Former generals worked in the fields of worlds they had once conquered. Former officials served the species they had once enslaved. It was hard work. It was humbling work. Some of them died doing it. None complained. The Valkyrie species was not destroyed. Humanity had argued strongly against collective punishment. The children of conquerors were not responsible for their ancestors' crimes. The Valkyrie would survive. They would live in a galaxy they no longer ruled, as equals to the species they had once enslaved. It was the hardest punishment of all for a people who had believed themselves superior for 100 millennia. But the trial was only part of the story. While justice was served, a new government was being born. The United Galactic Alliance was officially formed on the 50th anniversary of the invasion of Earth. The ceremony was held on a rebuilt human world, in a city called New Geneva. It stood where the Swiss Alps had once risen toward the sky, before Valkyrie bombardment had reduced them to rubble. Now new mountains rose there, buildings of glass and steel created by 100 different species working together. Parks filled with plants from 1,000 worlds. Streets where beings of every shape walked side by side in peace. The alliance was built on principles the humans had learned through their long and bloody history. Freedom for all species. Equality under law. The right to self-determination. The responsibility to protect the weak from the strong. These were ideas humans had fought and died for across centuries of wars and revolutions. Now they offered these ideas to the galaxy. Not everyone trusted them. Some species wondered if humans would become the new conquerors. They had seen empires rise before. They had heard pretty words from tyrants. Why should these Deathworlders be different? The answer came in actions, not words. Humans did not demand leadership of the Alliance. They did not claim special rights for themselves. They worked beside other species as partners. They shared their technology freely. They asked for nothing except friendship. Commander James Okonkwo, now retired, gave a speech that was taught in schools across the galaxy for generations. "We did not fight this war to become what we destroyed," he said. "We fought because no one should live in chains. We fought because the strong do not have the right to crush the weak. We fought because freedom is not something you can give to some people and deny to others. It belongs to everyone or it means nothing." Dr. Elena Vasquez gave the final speech of the ceremony. She was 103 years old. She had been a young physicist when the invasion came. She had lost her family, rebuilt herself from grief, and helped create technologies that changed the course of history. Now she stood before representatives of 400 species, her voice still strong despite her age. "They came to Earth expecting slaves," she said. "They found something they could not understand. A species that had spent its entire existence fighting itself, learning from its failures, rising from its ashes, growing stronger with each defeat." She paused, looking at the crowd. Rithani and Morians and architects and dozens of other species. All of them free. All of them looking at her with respect and gratitude. They thought our divisions made us weak. They were wrong. Our divisions taught us how to unite. Our wars taught us the price of peace. Our mistakes taught us humility. We are not a perfect species. We have done terrible things to each other. But we learned. We grew. We became better. She smiled. It was the same smile she had worn 60 years ago, in a bunker beneath the mountains, when she first realized humans could win. We are not conquerors. We are not rulers. We are the species that survived its own worst nature and found something worth believing in. And now we offer that belief to every being in this galaxy. Not as masters, but as what we always should have been. She spread her arms wide, embracing the crowd, embracing the future. "Welcome to the family." The crowd erupted in cheers. Species that had been enemies for millennia embraced. Former slaves and former soldiers wept together. In that moment, something new was born. Something that had never existed in a galaxy ruled by fear and force. Hope. In the years that followed, the Alliance grew and prospered. New technologies emerged from the collaboration of hundreds of species. Diseases were cured. Worlds were restored. Wrongs were slowly, painfully made right. Humanity did not dominate this new era. They did not need to. They had already given the galaxy the greatest gift they could offer. Not their weapons or their ships or their technology. Their example. A species born on a violent world, forged in endless conflict, shaped by disaster and tragedy, had chosen to be something better. They had taken their capacity for war and turned it into a capacity for liberation. They had taken their stubbornness and made it into courage. They had taken their divisions and transformed them into unity. On Earth, monuments rose to remember those who had fallen. The names of 2 billion dead were carved in stone that would last forever. Children born after the war visited these monuments and learned about sacrifice and courage. And in the galaxy, whenever beings faced impossible odds, whenever tyrants rose and freedom seemed lost, they remembered the story of the little blue planet that refused to break. They remembered humanity. They remembered that victory was always possible for those who never stopped fighting. And they remembered the words carved into the glass of an ancient desert, written by the survivors of an invasion meant to destroy them. We remember. We are coming. The Valkyrie had tried to break Earth. Instead, humanity had broken every chain in the galaxy. And the stars themselves seemed to shine a little brighter